everybody, it's meteorologist Joe Chaffee. It's a Friday night, and I think no one can be happier than me that we've made it to a Friday this week. It's been a rather long week in some respects. We're going to try to attempt to have an open forum tonight, and that I said we'll make this tonight Ask Me Anything night, so just keep your questions within reason, okay? And I'll try to answer them as best I can. And I'm not, whatever you want to talk about is fine. But before we do that, I want to say a few things ahead of time with regards to a few things that are going on with me and what I'm doing. And you can see the weather maps that we're looking at tonight to start off the night. So we've got severe weather that is moving across western Pennsylvania and western New York at the moment. We've got the Weather Prediction Center's rain prediction. I've got a satellite view that we're going to take a look at with regards to 4 systems in the tropics that the Hurricane Center is keeping an eye on. And they actually even issued an updated tropical weather outlook late this afternoon at 4:40 p.m., not waiting until the 8 o'clock because of one of the systems that shows signs of organization. And we also have the latest weather watches and warnings from the National Weather Service, and some of them are, well, at least they'll remind you that summer is ending and autumn is beginning. I just want to tell you, I have the app that I've been working on is, for all intents and purposes, it's finished. Just a couple of minor tweaks, and it's off to Google and off to Apple for approval. And then once that's done, it moves out. And at least I want to give a plug at the beginning, because some folks are on this at the video at the beginning and some at the middle and some at the end. But we've got my Patreon page that I've set up, the Patreon platform, and you can enjoy what I've been calling a weather forecasting experience as I try to create one for everybody. So you get my website posts come up there with no ads, and you actually get them on there before they're distributed on Facebook and on Twitter. So you'll get them first. You get them with no ads. You have the ability to comment, obviously, and I will respond, whereas I usually don't have time to respond when I post on Facebook. I try to, but there's only so many places you can be, and I want to devote my energy where I think it works better, and that's with a group of people that are genuinely interested in weather and want to have fun with it, want to experience it, want to learn more about it. And the Patreon platform is great for this. $2 a month is all I'm asking for to start. There are some higher tiers if you feel generous. It is a great way to support my channel. I'm doing exclusive videos just for Patreon members, and you can message me with respect to that. So just real fast, I'll put the link up here, and I'll put it up again later on, and it's also on the descriptor to this video, which is a good thing. And let's see, so here's part 1. Hello. There we go. And here's the other half. And it is, by the way, a flat earth free, troll feet free, weather control advocate free, geoengineers free, or hypester free. Okay? And that is another good thing about the Patreon platform. So do please consider it. As I said, it's a great way and an easy way to support my channel. Okay, let's talk weather. All right, so let me set up the board, and I already saw the first question that I think I want to address at this point. Hang on, folks. I'm trying to do something tonight where I'm keeping the chat up on the side so I can see what you guys are saying. And Christine Davis, you say, what about Florence reforming off the North Carolina coast? There has been a lot of stuff flying around in the usual suspect areas on social media regarding the comeback of Florence. It's really shameful, in my view, considering what is going on right now. with North Carolina, where we have rivers that have now risen to the point where one of the nuclear plants is at serious risk. Okay, as a dam may be getting ready to breach. Okay, you have the situation actually in South Carolina, where these rivers in North Carolina that are filled to their banks. Well, that water is only going to go one place. It's going to go downstream, and it's going into South Carolina, where there are many areas that are anticipating record flooding. To do this and put it in people's ears that there is a system that Florence is reforming off the coast. First off, it's part of the remnant system of Florence that moved through the mid-Atlantic and Northeast, but in no way does it ever even resemble Florence. And in fact, let me show you what we got here on the satellite loop, because that's the easiest way. And as we go through the day, this actually started last night in terms of seeing the convection around this weakening. What we have really is a low-level swirl. This is a low-level circulation that is pretty much void of any thunderstorm activity that is dropping southward. To the east of that, you see convection and thunderstorms with a frontal wave that part of that is going to be headed up toward Ireland and England this weekend, and it's not going to be going there as a major storm. We've been talking as what it seems from what we've seen. We pointed out a couple of days ago that the models were starting to back off on the intensity of this, going from showing a major animal gale going into Ireland and the UK to now something far less than that. Those of you that might be watching, I'm sure you're in tune with whatever they're saying over at the UK Met Office or at Met Iran in Ireland. But from what I saw earlier, it really doesn't look all that bad with respect to that low that's coming out. But do pay attention to what your local National Weather Service is saying. But back to this low-level swirl here. I mean, they're designed basically. The people who put those up really should be shameful. No context at all. A graphic that just comes up there and says that Florence is coming back because they want you to click on it. Okay, that's irresponsible. It's shameful. We would never do that here. We never have and never will. I never have done anything remotely close to that. There is a logical way to explain these things, and unless and conditions are not favorable for this, unless we see thunderstorms start developing around the center and the thunderstorms increasing, the circulation tightening up, this is going to be nothing more than a low-level swirl of clouds with some showers, and that's it. And it really won't have much material impact on the weather in the Carolinas as it heads there. Now look, if it changes, then we will see what's happening and adjust. But right now, based on what I'm seeing, what the Hurricane Center is seeing, the probability of this developing into anything is extremely low. Okay, and I don't see any hint on any model of the global models or the short-range models that suggest that this could wind up developing. And I know that there's always there's always the possibility, there's always the chance that that when you see something like that that's out here, where we'll look at this tomorrow evening and suddenly you find you've got thunderstorms blowing up around it, and there's a tight circulation that's developing, and their satellite wind estimates back to 40 knots. I've seen that happen where you think it's not going to develop, but it does. But I don't have it. There's nothing out there that I can see that says that's possible. Now, if there's a forecaster out there that can show me why you might say that this thing could reform, I will gladly sit back and listen to your argument, and then I'll decide whether I will fight against you on it, or perhaps you might point out something that I'm missing. But if I'm missing it, so are the hundreds of other responsible forecasters who are not putting up nonsense like I saw on the internet. So that is the system that takes care of that. I'm going to come back to the tropics in just a bit, because I want to just do some of this the weather on the U.S. front and center before we get to the tropics. So here we have the Weather Service's watches and warnings and advisories that are up, and there are a couple of things here that I find interesting. First off, we've got flood watches, flash flood watches, flood warnings, and flash flood warnings are going on through much of central Texas, on northward to almost the entire state of Oklahoma, except the extreme northern part in the Panhandle, extending into Arkansas. And this is particularly good in a way because of the fact that we know that Okie AG, who's one of our regulars here, has pointed out that he's had basically an inch of rain all summer. So the rain is quite welcomed in this extremely dry area of the southern plains and back down into Texas. And this is all, by the way, the remnants of that tropical depression that developed in the Gulf of California between the Baja Peninsula and the coast of Mexico 2 days ago, and that moisture moved up into through northern Mexico into New Mexico and Texas, and now has spread up further north and east from there. To the north, around the Great Lakes, that blue that you see covering a good chunk of northeastern Wisconsin, those are frost advisories, the first ones of the very young season coming on the last full day of summer. We also have high wind warnings up for northern Michigan. We have frost advisories for northeastern Minnesota. The Gale Center that is developing has also prompted high wind warnings across the Canadian province of Quebec today for wind gusts up to 90 kilometers an hour, or roughly over 50 miles an hour, which that's going to occur with the intense low that's going to develop out of this and then move out toward Labrador and then eventually find its way between Labrador and Greenland. So pretty busy there. The other thing that's going on is that we have severe weather. Now, the radars and the severe weather watches that are up, remember folks, it's coming up on 7:15 Eastern time, so this is all dated. Please make sure you check for the latest if you're watching this on the replay by going to your local National Weather Service office or weather.gov. You can access your local National Weather Service office from there so you can see the latest watches and warnings. But we have a pretty extensive severe thunderstorm watch tonight covering areas from eastern Ohio. There's actually 2 watch boxes, one eastern Ohio, western Pennsylvania, and a second watch box that covers parts of northwest Pennsylvania and then runs up through western New York and into north central New York. So that includes the areas in and around Lake Ontario, Syracuse, Providence, Rochester, and points north and northeast from there. This is all encased inside an area of enhanced risk of severe weather, and then a larger area of slight risk, and then an even larger area of marginal risk. And you can see the radar echoes that are indicated down in through Oklahoma. Most of this, except for the Panhandle, the whole state is raining at the moment. And the rainfall, by the way, is going to be significant. Those thunderstorms are going to fall apart before they reach my area, eastern. Well, they may hold together for eastern Pennsylvania when they come through during the around midnight or after midnight, and in northern New Jersey, but they're going to quickly weaken as they move through the Hudson Valley and head towards southern New England and the coast. So I'm thinking they'll, at least where I am on Long Island, I'm not going to see much of anything unless something really holds together for too long, and then we head on into the weekend. As far as rainfall is concerned, a large area of 4 or 5 inches of rain extending from northeast Texas into parts of Oklahoma. This is in addition. This is from 8 o'clock tonight, so it doesn't count anything that's fallen up until now. So this is from 8 o'clock tonight over the next 7 days, with heavy rains across the lower Mississippi Valley into Tennessee and western Kentucky, northwest Mississippi, and you've got some decent rains that extend even up the east coast of 2.5 inches. Most of that is going to come on Tuesday, as we see the next low pressure system and cold front come east, and tonight's cold front, which stalls to our south and sets up for what could be significant rains for western Virginia and West Virginia on the order of several inches or more. You can see the Weather Prediction Center has that finger of heavy rain, the brighter reds and oranges pushing into that area of the Mid-Atlantic states, which is, which has been just clobbered with rain, as we know, for the entire summer, and now that pattern continues right into the fall. The northeast satellite view, which is, I'm going to bring front and center here, you can actually pick the edge of that low cloud swirl that's out in the Atlantic. You don't see any thunderstorms with it, really. When you take a good look, there's very little there. And then, of course, you have the big blow up of thunderstorms going on now with the front as it approaches. You see them firing up here. The line fires up as it moves into northwest PA and western New York. So there are some pretty strong cells in that particular region. We can bring up the tighter view of the radar, and we'll do that right now as I move a few things around, or attempt to move a few things around. All right, you know what? It's just easier if I get rid of this, because this is what I want, full screen and up top. By the way, I am seeing your chat, so it looks like everybody's behaving themselves. Let's see. Mike Alukan, thank you for sharing your years of education and experience to keep up the good work. Thank you very much. I really appreciate, your kind words. Thank you. And thank you very much for being here as well. This channel doesn't work unless there's somebody watching it, and you guys are watching, and I'm very thankful for that. Here's the U.S. radar. I'm going to freshen this up really fast. See if we got any late. Okay, so there's your line. That's a pretty interesting line of storms that we have moving along. The line is running across now into through west. It's through Buffalo. They got to 90 degrees today in Buffalo. By the way, my area was mostly low 70s for highs because of the clouds and the wind off the water. It got to 90. In what parts of western New York today. Just an incredibly hot day. And that line extends down through Ohio into southern Indiana, northwestern Kentucky. It's actually fractured there in two pieces. And then you start to see the rain area that is further west and south, which we can take a look at. Again, remember, folks, radar right now it's 7:20. So if you're watching this later, 7:20 Eastern Time, local weather service office is where you have to go to get the updated radars and warnings and watches, if there are any, at weather.gov. And there's the rain across the southern plains throughout much of Oklahoma and in through western Arkansas and eastern Texas. And we have flash flooding issues that are going on there. Quick check along in Florida. We've had some rain and thunderstorms going on in southwest Florida. A small concentration there that is down by Naples, Sarasota, and extending down into parts of the Keys, and then another small area up around Tampa. Great Lakes are quiet. A little bit of rain coming into the Pacific Northwest, and a little bit of rain in the Southwest, in southwestern Arizona and in southeastern California. So that pretty much sums it up as far as the radar goes. And let's take a look at the local, what's going to happen here going forward. So we'll come back. I'm going to wait to just do the tropics. We'll take a look at, I got the new GFS, or we should have the new GFS out, or most of it. Yeah, it looks like we have the whole thing, so that's good. So let's take a look at that. Let me just make sure that you guys are seeing what I'm seeing. Thank you, Tropical Tidbits, for the wonderful maps. Shut the windows in Michigan, says Gary Rivard. It's getting cold. I bet it is, or it will be, with that next front going by and the first frost advisories of the season. Now, running forward, the front moves through and stalls. Off the Florida coast, you see where there's that small closed 10-12 isobar, okay? That is the low-level circulation that we've been talking about. Notice that there is very little with it. You don't see those dark greens showing rain or intense radar echoes. They're just not there. So that's, this is, it's not on any model. So I'm not going to get wrapped up on this. we'll pull up the NAM just to show you on the NAM. The NAM has even less. This is supposed to be what the radar is supposed to look like. That is not the signature of a tropical system, okay? It's a signature of a weak low-level circulation. I can put the 3-kilometer NAM up and you can see next to nothing there. I don't know if the HRRR is, actually the grid doesn't go out far enough, but it still doesn't show much of anything, even where you can see it. So again, not responsible to do to say to put out headlines like that, because the reality is a lot of people don't. They could very well, after you go on there, say no, it's not happening, but that's not what people do. They don't take the bait, okay? And in which case they're just left with the headline obviously created to try to get you to take the bait. Anyway, you see there's not much with that. And in fact, when we start to get the weather system that is going to be moving out to the northeast from this early next week, you're going to get that low-level swirl is going to wind up getting absorbed by the developing frontal zone. By the way, meanwhile, look at that deep low that by tonight, a 973 low sitting there in southeastern Canada, and the gradient is insane. Okay, so no wonder that they're talking about high wind of gusts of 50 to 60 miles an hour with this. Of course, with the gradient so tight, that's a pretty deep storm for this time of year. But it reflects what's going on in southern Canada in terms of the overall pattern, because it has been so darn cold up there. And you're getting these mid-fall-like scenarios and seeing some snow out of it already, down almost to the border here. But going into next week, the weekend for my area, the front stalls. Johnny Quest, you're going to have a little wave that develops on that front, producing some rain near you on Sunday, and that narrow band of rain is going to extend across Maryland and southern Pennsylvania and off the New Jersey coast, but that next high is going to suppress things for a short time. So we're going to have to wait till later Monday, Tuesday, you start to get more rain developing, low pressure there just north of International Falls, Minnesota. The big high off the coast of Maine, the tight onshore flow in the Atlantic. There's a lot of Atlantic moisture starting to come into play, and that lifts up Monday night and Tuesday in the form of some heavy rains. Now, it looks like there'll be a solid band of rain coming up for the coastal plain. A bit of a hole develops on this run of the GFS, not showing less across western Virginia and West Virginia. It's going to take a while for that weather system to move through. We thought yesterday that this front would get by here by late Wednesday night and see improving weather conditions on Thursday. But once again, the GFS a little bit over-enthusiastic in amplifying the trough and moving things along. So the front does want to it seems to get hung up a bit. A push of cooler, drier air, but not nearly as cool as was advertised by prior runs. I want to warn you that the 12Z run and the 18Z run have been kind of battling back and forth on this idea. You do get into some much cooler air across the northern plains and in the northern Rockies, but at least on this run, we're seeing resistance by the models in amplifying the trough in the east, like it was doing for a number of days, and actually to some degree did it on the very last run. So the European, I didn't give it quite a good look, so we can actually look at it now. Just want to make sure you guys are seeing everything I'm seeing here, and I'm going to roll back on the upper air starting from today. So cold front comes through. You can see the short wave that's causing that big storm in Labrador. You follow that patch of blue that goes into southeastern Canada and gets bluer. I mean, that's a fairly intense feature in the upper atmosphere that goes from there to between Labrador and Greenland. Here comes the next trough. Still have that ridge off the east coast, by the way, but the trough is pretty broad. It doesn't really extend all the way down, and then that lifts out, and then yet another trough drops in further west on this particular run. So it calls into question whether that cooler air makes it to the east or stays confined from the Great Lakes westward. This is something, by the way, that the GFS has been guilty of pretty much for the last 6 weeks, where it keeps showing enough troughing to bring some cooler air. In August, it would have been nice to break that atrocious humidity, and then it winds up being, there's less amplitude. One of the things I'm noticing, by the way, if you look at what's going on in Canada, there's a lot of energy running around. I'll run it back, okay? You've got the vortex that's up northwest of Hudson's Bay. You've got a shortwave trough coming into the west coast. You've got some energy in the Gulf of Alaska. You've got all this energy running around, and I think what happens is, and it happens every run, as models key on different short waves, the speed of the short wave may change, the trough, the structure of the trough seems to change, that we keep winding up with different outcomes. And perhaps the reason for that is perhaps the model responding, building this big ridge in the Gulf of Alaska and another big ridge off the coast of Europe. So it looks to me as if the atmosphere is a bit out of whack with some of these things that are happening, and that often leads to models having a bit of a difficult time handling what's out there. Now, I'm going to set this up, and we're going to come back to this part because I want to look at the upper air. We're going to look at the upper air with respect to what's happening in the tropics. So I'm just setting the map up here, and then we're going to go. I'm going to come back to this, and so let's start with the various systems that are out there. We have 97L. That is the system that the Hurricane Center actually sent out the updated tropical weather outlook, which, by the way, you can look at your leisure at nhc.noaa.gov. We may have a new one out by the time we're done with this live stream tonight. Most of the model track guidance takes this system to the west. I actually didn't look closely at the intensity guidance. As far as the low-level swirl is concerned, and this goes with what the global models are showing, again, anytime you see these maps, you see what Levi Cowan says in the upper corner, do not use these maps to make decisions. Please remember that in the event we wind up with another threat. We don't have a threat here. If you missed my rant in the beginning, I know that there was stuff out there on the internet regarding the rebirth of Florence. It was grossly irresponsible for the people who put those. They should be ashamed of themselves for doing that. This is just what they run the track model guidance just in case. We know that this is eventually going to get absorbed by what's going on in the east. So this kind of matches up with what the global models are showing. Meanwhile, we've got a system off the African coast, well south of the Cape Verde Islands, by the way. It's actually south of 10 degrees north. It's almost down to about 6 or 7 degrees north is where they initialized it. So this, you're at the time of year now, as far as the Cape Verde seasons, two things. The intertropical convergence zone begins to weaken and shift further south, and the push, the push of the trade winds, the easterlies, starts to get weaker and weaker. So oftentimes when you get systems that develop out here in the latter part of September, they never seem to get much past 45 or 50. They just kind of hang around there because there's no real push. There is a bit of a push, or at least enough where the track model guidance is carrying this off to the west. The Hurricane Center suggests that this has a 60% chance of developing into a tropical depression over the next 5 days. The system we showed you here is the one that they upgraded to this afternoon to 40%. And they did mention in there that a tropical depression could be forming, and we'll look at what it looks like on the satellite. So we'll go to the one that's east of the Windward Islands, and it's between 10 and 15 north. If you look closely on this loop here, you're going to see that there appears to be some kind of low-level circulation on the edge. You see it on the loop toward the last few frames. You see that the curl of the clouds suggests that there might be something there on the edge. But also notice, you've got a lot of clouds that are being blown away to the northeast. There is upper-level shear here. that is going to get in the way in the long haul. So bear that in mind, that this may not survive the shear that's out there. Conditions are not all that favorable, especially as it moves further to the west. There are strong winds in the upper atmosphere that could that for the most part, I think, will probably sound the death knell to this. Meanwhile, you can see the wave off the African coast. It's a fairly impressive, well-developed wave. It's got that curvature to it, like something's trying to develop. Maybe it has a bit of a mid-level circulation. I can see a little bit of evidence of that. But again, it's so far south. It's south of 10 north. So it's got a long way to go. But the Hurricane Center does mention this. And the other system, of course, is the one... I'm just going to see if I can... All right, so let me get rid of these. And just want to make sure you can see what I'm seeing. I'm going to try and get a satellite where we can take a look. That's the swirl off the southeast coast. I want to get that fourth system here for you. All right, so we'll get rid of that. So let's go to nhc.noaa.gov. Your National Hurricane Center, your go-to page here, has not been updated since 4/21. If you come up to the menu, you can go to satellite imagery, and we can pull up, I'm going to pull up the big Atlantic loop, because we can at least see the northern part of that. Those clouds, make sure you guys can see it there. Go right in the center of the picture all the way up to the top. You see where the swirl is off the southeast coast. We'll just go to the right of that. That is the system that you're going to wind up seeing developing into a subtropical or eventually a tropical storm. All the global models, by the way, show that happening. So I think the confidence level is high, and the Hurricane Center has that a 70% chance of developing. It also will be drifting southward. So I think we can go back at this point and take a look at the upper air. I'll stop here for a second. Alan Malone, why did it take so long to determine where Florence was going to come ashore? The forecast out 48 hours actually only missed the landfall point by about 2 miles, which was remarkable. The forecasting from Florence, in my view, was one of the best, in terms of track, was one of the best forecasts that the Hurricane Center has perhaps ever done. I think they did an absolutely spectacular job all the way around in warning about the potential for catastrophic rains, the issue regarding the storm surge when those top winds dropped off and the gales expanded. That was a bad sign with respect to the storm surge, to make it much more extensive and much more threatening, apparently. But the message got lost because the mainstream media focused on, well, it's no longer they got focused on the categories. No longer a Category 4, no longer a Category 3. Now it's a Category 2. And instead of paying attention to what was happening, but you know, the attention span is extremely low, and frankly, a lot of them are about as useful as a box of rocks. Okay, so you got two rants in here for the price of one. Okay. I know somebody just put the question about a tropical storm crossing the equator. Yeah, it would, you know, when they get near the equator, the Coriolis, they would just not, you know, they would just basically fall apart. There was one, I think there was one a few years ago that kind of did that. I got to go back and look. But yeah, it's not something that certainly we see very often. But when they are that far south, there was a storm maybe a couple of years ago, maybe it was last year, that formed down around 5 degrees north, and I think we were all sort of kidding about even the Hurricane Center, I remember writing about the fact that it was so far south that you wonder whether it would just, you know, cease to be in terms of the circulation because of the Coriolis. But you know, it's one of those things. Okay, let me come back to let's come back to the upper air about what's happening here. I'm watching your. I see you guys on the chat, so you know I'm watching to see. Master Chief, hold your thought there for a second, and if I forget to come back, you know, to your point about the pattern change, just remind me, and I'll try to address it for you. Okay, so watch the upper air, folks, and what's going to happen out in the Atlantic, because you basically have this split with a ridge off the east coast, a ridge off the west coast of Europe near Spain and Portugal, and the system in the middle that drops southward. To the north, we have this strong jet stream across the Atlantic, so you get these troughs that move off the coast of Canada. They swing across the Atlantic, they attempt to pick the system up, and it doesn't quite work. In fact, it almost looks as if a little shortwave kind of another shortwave gets involved with the circulation here, and it's got a very wrapped up upper low. I got to tell you, looking at the structure of how it is on the upper air here, I would think that this would be more subtropical than anything else. That's a pretty cold feature and a rather broad looking upper air feature. So I wonder, you know, whether this may just wind up being, you know, this could be a strong subtropical storm for a while. Then another short wave comes through. You can see it here off of eastern Canada, attempts to pick it up, and prior model runs were picking it up on the GFS, not the European. Now this run does not pick it up, and there's a bit of a ridge that builds in between, so it moves it southward and westward. It just gets silly with this. You start to get, you know, these silly long-range tracks that really are just not good tools, and I think it explains the fact that you've got this sort of atmosphere in turmoil in terms of the very active jet stream, a lot of short waves running around, and models not really knowing how to proceed and how to handle all this. So I think the way to summarize it, I think the way to look at this is the fact that yeah, you do have certainly you've got these four systems out there. The one that's off the east coast, off the immediate east coast, I am not concerned about at the moment, and I don't expect to be concerned about it. The one that is out in the central Atlantic is probably the one that has the best shot at becoming a tropical storm or a hurricane, but you know what? It's in the central Atlantic, and it's just going to be, you know, unless there's something that drives it westward the way that it did with Florence, it's a fish storm. So I'm not really too concerned about that. The system east of the windwards, if we wind up seeing that upgraded to a tropical depression, it may very well be, but I wonder how long it will last before the wind shear takes it apart. And the one in the eastern Atlantic might develop, but the push across the Atlantic is not as strong as it was a couple of weeks ago, and it's pretty far to the south. So it may take a good week to make it all the way across, and there may be obstacles along the way, including wind shear that might wind up ripping it apart. And none of the global models, by the way, except for the European, that kind of holds the feature together when when a week from now it's near the southern Leeward Islands, but then it goes into the Caribbean like Isaac did and gets ripped apart by wind shear. The other thing is the models today, you know, the day run, still trying to show this idea of maybe something coming out of the Caribbean after day 10 or 11. I'm gonna hold on to that. Perhaps it's reflecting that the system that's off the African coast now. Perhaps maybe that'll be in the Central Caribbean in about 10 days or so. To me, it looked more like it was coming out of a gyre of moisture that was going to be over Central America, and we're going to see several systems spawned out of that. Two in the Pacific, I believe, and possibly one here in the Atlantic Basin. But that is still ways away in the long range. So let's chat. Okay, let's do that. Okay, David Schwartz points out that there was a tropical system back in 2001 that formed at 1.5 degrees north by Malaysia, and that was the lowest tropical, in terms of latitude, the lowest a tropical system had ever formed. I didn't know that. That's a good factoid to look at. Okay, Master Chief. As far as the pattern change is concerned, there is going to be a gradual pattern change across North America. You're going to try to get more troughing into the east. It will mean for cooler weather in probably the upper Midwest and the plains. Some model runs want to bring that cool air with a vengeance into the eastern part of the United States. The earlier run today in the GFS was a colder looking run starting later next weekend and beyond. This run today, the 18Z, the in-between run, not so much. Maybe it's a compromise between the two perhaps holds up a bit better. But I have noticed that the in-between runs have been much flatter than the 0 and 12Z runs. Maybe there's something going on, but I'm suspicious, if only because of the fact that we've been down this road before in the last 4 or 5 weeks, and these troughs have wound up being not nearly as impressive as modeled. Last night, David Allen says, some places in New England had their earliest snowfall since 1974, even to a low elevation. Also, 2 inches of rain fell yesterday, receiving the drought a bit. Could you look at Europe? Sure. I'm sorry, Northern England. Okay, not New England, Northern England. My mistake. All right, let's take a look at Europe really fast. There we go. By the way, there's a lot of areas in southern Canada that have seen some early snows, and actually started about almost a week or two ago, so quite early snows indeed. So what's happening here? We still are under the influence of a pretty strong flow from the Atlantic, where we've been getting these occasional gale centers. I'll bring the window up so you can see the maps, and you're not seeing my mug. By the way, somebody asked earlier, I saw what my favorite ice cream flavor is. Well, I love chocolate, I love butter pecan, but I like nothing better than mixing the two flavors together and then adding some extra pecans in there. I love that. And then I'll crumble up some Tate's chocolate chip cookies in there too, or some oatmeal cookies if I can get my hands on some fresh ones. Okay, so the Gale Center, you've had a series of them this week. It started back with Helene back last week. This is the one now for Saturday into Sunday, which again looks very weak. It really doesn't get going until it goes into Eastern Europe. And even here, it's much less intense than what was being modeled just a couple of runs ago. It seems like it gets stronger further east on every run. And I have to tell you, I mean, you'll get some wind and rain out of it, but it'll be a big yawn if it comes in looking this way. The air, by the way, to the north actually is quite chilly. You can see these blue lines, the colder thickness values in the atmosphere, basically telling us how cold the atmosphere is, how thick the cold layer is. Moves fairly far south. Doesn't necessarily mean that temperatures are going to be down to the freezing level, but it is a chilly air mass for this time of year, certainly reflecting how cold it is aloft. And then after that, looks like high pressure builds in for a little while. You get a bit of a ridge there in Western Europe, sort of deflects those Atlantic Ocean storms further north and west, so it takes you out of the flow here. There's a big one for next weekend that's running up near Iceland that goes by well to your north. A pretty strong gale, but it looks like that would impact, say, more northern Scotland than anything else, and that eventually winds up going into Europe. The overall pattern for you is that you do start off, when we look at the upper air, and I'm going to just back it up a little bit. Up until now, you've had these series of storms, this very stormy pattern here for September in the Atlantic, but then a big ridge builds there over Spain. So once the last shortwave trough comes through here next on Sunday, this is just going back now 72 hours. So this is what's been going on, and then once that this has changed so much since what was shown here a few days ago. Just a weak trough that comes through here, and then after that, you do get a nice ridge that builds up over Western Europe and over France and southern England, short waves get deflected to the north, so you're out of that flow, and you still have a bit of a ridge there off the coast of France going into the long range around day 7 and 8 before you get that system up to the north that crashes in, and then things start to move along again. So you know what? Those first couple of gales, you've already been through those. I'm thinking the one for this weekend doesn't really look all that impressive to me. So hopefully it won't be. Hopefully I'll be right and nothing will happen. Fingers crossed. Coming back to the board here. Okay, so I'm full screen. Okay. Still Enzo neutral right now. That is correct. 5,000 subscribers with no videos. We are Enzo neutral. It looks like if we're going to get to the El Nino, it may be more central and west based, which could lead to a different winter outcome in the east as opposed to when you have an east based El Nino, which tends to make for warm, wet winters in the eastern part of the United States. I have to tell you, I mean, I know a few people, everybody's going to ask me, and I always say it, I am not a good long-range guy. I have a tough time getting my head around it, but I got to tell you, I mean, in terms of snowfall around here, which does not necessarily have to match up with the temperatures, we're kind of due for a subpar year. It's going to happen one of these winters. We've had so many winters where we've been above average in my neck of the woods, something like 8 out of the last 9 in some areas less the case, depends on where you are. There's always a lot of variability in snowfall, and you know, we had heavy snowfall winters in very warm winters in that stretch, as well as in the colder winters in that stretch. So temperature and snow don't necessarily go together. So I know the snow lovers really just want a definitive answer. You're never going to get it from me. My approach with all of this has always been to just kind of sit there and watch it as it goes along, and just go with the flow. When the pattern changes, you change. When the pattern changes again, you change again. Talk about the west coast of Mexico, Ruru 25. You know, there is potential for tropical cyclone development off the coast of Mexico in the longer term. I honestly didn't give it a good look, but if you remind me tomorrow, I will do it, because I'm going to start running out of time soon here. Let's see. Master Chef, when the world ends, this has nothing to do with meteorology. So I don't know who, I guess you're responding to someone else, but I will say this. One of the problems with predicting the apocalypse is that you can only be right once. And then what do you do? The end of the world, Ben, a week from next Wednesday at 1:10. All right? And not a second before or a second after. How are models made, asked Johnny Quest. Several people can add information and get several different results. Well, so can models. Weather models, they're, you know, huge mathematical formulas, and you know, you have the laws of physics and thermodynamics, and certain assumptions are made with regards to the atmosphere. Data goes in, and different models are written differently in terms of the sets of equations that they use. The European model is a bit different than the GFS model, which is a bit different from the Canadian model. They were all written to emphasize different things. The Watson, the Thunder model, the Roaring Thunder model, I think it's called, the one that IBM has, which actually worked pretty good a few times last winter. That's got its own set of, you know, everybody kind of takes the math, and then maneuvers it, I guess is maybe a good word, in such a way to come out with an outcome. And you get models that emphasize different things, and you wind up seeing different outcomes, and your job is to try to sort of figure it out. And sometimes it's actually not just sometimes, all the time, it's not easy. So armed American, we the people, let's hope 98L doesn't reform and come at the Carolinas. It doesn't look like it will. Conditions are not favorable for it to redevelop. Okay, so just bear that in mind. If it changes, I will be the first one to tell you that it looks like that may be changing. But again, I emphasize anybody that's watching from that area that has been listening to you know, this sort of stuff. I really don't see anything on any. There's not even a single model that I could find that does anything with this. Okay, so I'm not really overly concerned with respect to that. let's see. Check the subsurface anomalies for any doubters that will prove that there is a chance. I'm not. What do you? I'm not sure what you're referring to when you say the subsurface anomalies. The subsurface anomalies of what? If you can clarify that. Fall foliage has always reminded me of fruity pebbles. Let's see. I'm just trying to trace your conversation there, Master Chef. So I'm not understanding. Oh, Ruru, don't make me feel bad. Okay, are you still there? Hang on. Temperature depth anomalies in the equatorial Pacific. Are you talking about with respect to the El Nino? It's relating to the El Nino. Okay. I haven't looked at the. I actually haven't looked at the temperature. Okay, great. Understood. I haven't looked at those temperature anomalies out there in the last couple of weeks. I did look. I think the last time I looked at the El Nino was a couple of weeks ago. Hang on there, Ruru. Okay, we'll take a look at the Pacific. I think this would be a good view here. So we'll just look at what the GFS does with this on the Pacific, and we're deep into the long range here. So, and I do have a satellite that we can look at. There we go. There's not much going on through much of next week. It's after that that the models start. When I was talking about this gyre of moisture over Central America, by the time we get to next weekend, you've got 3 low pressure centers that are spawned on the Pacific side, and I think one of them is going to wind up spawning on the in the Gulf in the Caribbean. But I have noticed that that system there is right along the coast of Mexico that kind of straddles the coast all the way up through the first week of October. So you're fine for this coming week. It's beyond that, next weekend and beyond, that there might be an issue. And I know I have it hidden here somewhere, so hang in there. Make me small. I hit it back. There we go. So here's the Pacific satellite right now. And there's really not much going on. There's a disturbance that's off the coast of Mexico here, moving westward. There doesn't really seem to be much going on here that's worth worrying about until later next week and beyond. That's when I think it gets a bit more favorable for something to develop on both the Pacific side and on the Atlantic side. Okay, all right, let's go back here. If I had to spend the entire month of February, International Falls or Caribou, Maine, either one. I guess if you're giving me only those 2 choices, either one. But if you had to really, oh, you're welcome, Ruru. No worries. I'm sorry. Sometimes I get caught up and I'm thinking I don't have time, and then I realize I do have time. So I was glad to accommodate. I would go to Caribou, Maine first, because I love northern New England. So I would go to Caribou, Maine first, but I definitely would also go to International Falls, because I really would love to see that part of the country as well. Okay, so we've got the new Hurricane Center here. So let's see what they're saying. Okay, so I'll pull it up for you. I'll put it up on the screen. I'll use the 5-day one, so we can look at how the systems, how they're looking at all of this. So, with respect to the system off the North Carolina coast, that's dropping southwestward and then westward, still in the yellow. Yellow is less than, it's a 10. They're saying they're forecasting 10%. 48 hours, 30% next 5 days. Little development anticipated for the next day or two. Environmental conditions could become more conducive for slow development late this weekend or early next week when the system moves into the southwest Atlantic, closer to the coast. But who knows? It may be so close to the coast, and by that time, you've got that next frontal zone that's going to probably lift it up into it. The system near the windwards. The well-defined low-pressure system, if the produce persistent thunderstorms, current trends continue, advisories could be issued later tonight or Saturday. By late this weekend, upper-level winds and dry air, which there's plenty of, are likely to prevent further development while it moves west-northwest to northwest at 10, 60% in both. The one in the far eastern Atlantic, limited shower and thunderstorm activity. System appears to have become better organized since earlier today. A depression could form in the next day or two, moving west at 15 to 20 across the low latitudes of the eastern and central tropical Atlantic through early next week. 40 in the next 48 hours, 40% chance at 60 in the next 5 days. And the one in the central Atlantic, 30 and 70 in terms of the percent chance for development. And I said that's the one that the one in the central Atlantic is the one where the models really kind of wrap up some kind of ocean storm there. So let me come back front and center. Okay, and I'm going to have to wrap it up now because we're coming up on 8 o'clock and I got to get some dinner. Let's see. All right, looks like you got everything in here. I hope I got to everybody's questions. And by the way, you can always ask me if I do. You know, it was a little easier tonight as I was scrolling through the board. I had the pop-up chat window open so I could kind of have both of you guys things going at the same time. I'll try and keep doing that. It's a little, you know, I got to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Nimble. I got to be nimble with my handiwork with regards to the mouse and bringing up the maps and talking all at the same time. So if it gets a little sloppy, forgive me for it. But believe me, I'm doing my best. All right, one more time for a couple of shameless self-promotions. I guess I know I've been hitting the Patreon platform, but again, it is a good place to congregate amongst weather people without having to deal with flat earthers, trolls, weather control people, geoengineers, and you know all the rest. So you can get there by put the Patreon link on the board. It's $2 a month. You get all my website posts. You get it app-free. I'm sorry, you get it ad-free. And there is a Patreon app, so you can look at all this stuff on your phone with an app, and you don't have to open up a browser or anything. So it makes that easy. And there are different tiers if you're feeling more generous. It's a great way to support my channel. And I'm continuing to expand. I have... I mentioned this at the beginning, but in case you joined late, I've been working on an app. It really focuses on the local weather in the New York, New Jersey, Long Island, Southern Connecticut, the Lower Hudson Valley region. So if you're watching from there, this will really work for you. But there'll be other things on there as well. And of course, you'll get other posts that I do. It'll come in handy during the wintertime if you're in the Northeast, because I put the Weather Service snow maps up all on one page that update automatically. So that'll be on the app, and it's going to be free. So that will be coming out in a couple of weeks. So that'll be another thing to add on to. And here's the Patreon link. It's also on the descriptor to this video. I would also just say, for those of you who would like, another way is if you shop on Amazon. And this is an easy way, because it doesn't cost you a dime. If you use this link I'm putting up here on the chat board to shop on Amazon with it, doesn't matter what you buy. If you search, use the search box to look at whatever it is you need. Whatever you buy, you get your stuff at Amazon's great prices, hopefully, and Amazon throws me back some coin out of their pocket, and I get a couple of cigars and a cup of coffee. 99 Wolves, the app will be free in the App Store when it is issued. It is not out there yet, so just be patient. Weather and Low, Patreon would be a good place for you to subscribe to for all the questions that you drive me crazy with sometimes between here and on my Facebook page. So why don't you pop up on Patreon, because that's another thing. You have messaging ability to me. I will respond to you if you are a subscriber on Patreon. I'm going to back off on subscribing on Facebook for a number of reasons, because I've been, becoming thoroughly disgusted with the platform in how they are treating people like me, whether people like me and other people that are just, trying to just make a living every day and pay their bills and feed their families, and they're just playing all sorts of games when it comes to distribution and people seeing your videos and taking away your publishing tools and not telling you why, giving you a 200-page PDF to read to say that you violated their policies, but you have no idea at all what you did, and after 7 weeks, I still don't have any idea what I did. So, and I can tell you right now, I didn't do anything. So I'd rather operate on a platform where I've got whether people on there that are interested, that enjoy this, and I know that everything that I do gets to you. You get your notifications like they don't get on Facebook. If I get people tell me all the time, hey, I got my I'm on your page, I got my notifications turned on, and when you do your live videos, I get the notifications 4 hours later. I don't get them at all. So this is a way where you get your notifications when I put up posts and when I do exclusive videos just for Patreon members that are not seen by Facebook people, and they're not on YouTube. So just consider it, please. And of course, I'm always going to be doing my YouTube video most times once a day, unless I'm not feeling up to it. So thanks very much for a great Friday night. We're just a disclaimer. We're a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates Program, which is an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for us to earn fees by linking to Amazon.com and their affiliated sites. So thanks again for being here. We had a nice crowd tonight on a Friday night, and it works. Okie AG, did you get some rain today? Because I saw the radar was absolutely loaded where you are. 99 Wolf says one dislike is one flat earther or a heart person. That's what I could believe. No heart people either. And I'm one other thing. When I see them on the chat, they're going. They're getting thrown off, because I'm just not going to tolerate it anymore. I let it go for too long. Now I'm at the point where the people that want to be here should be here and have a good experience. And I'm not dealing with flat earthers, harpists, and all the rest. Okay, I know you're not a harp person. I understand, 99 Wolves. Okie AG. Getting wet here today. Good. You're getting your rain, and if you came on late, I talked about it at the beginning. So we did a lot of weather tonight. So you go back at the beginning and watch. All right, folks, have a great night. 5 after 8 Eastern Time. Remember, check your local radars. The stuff on here is dated. It started the live stream at 7 o'clock Eastern. So if you're watching this at 11 o'clock at night or at midnight, you're going to be looking at old radars. So you want to make sure you check the new ones. Good night. We'll be on over the weekend at some point. Just watch for the schedule. I'll put it up, and we'll see you then.